Hi, everyone. My name is Jonah Gottlieb. I'm the 18-year-old co-founder and executive director of the National Children's Campaign, and I'm here today moderating the Endangering Generations panel, talking with this esteemed group of panelists about how young people and children especially are being put at risk by environmental and climate policies. So I'm joined today by Levi Draheim. He's a plaintiff on the Juliana case and Youth v. Gov. Jenna Reed from the Union for Concerned Scientists, who authored a report called Endangering Generations about children's health and environmental impacts. And Say Obit Witherspoon, the executive director of the Children's Environmental Health Network, as well as Dr. Mona Hanna, a pediatrician from Flint, Michigan. And last but certainly not least, Mustafa Santiago Ali, a man of many, who wears many hats, a former EPA administrator and advisory board member for the Union of Concerned Scientists and the National Children's Campaign. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all at home for watching. Happy Earth Day. We're excited to have you. So first, to Jenna. So you recently authored a report on the Trump administration's assaults on science and how it's affecting kids' health. Could you just elaborate on a few of the most egregious examples?
Thanks, Jonah. An honor to be a part of this panel, so thanks so much for having me. I'm here today to talk about how the Trump administration has abandoned our nation's mission of protecting kids based on the best evidence. Sadly, the way in which this administration is handling the COVID-19 response is further illustrative of this disregard. As Jonah mentioned, my team at the Union of Concerned Scientists released a report earlier this year, Endangering Generations, which found that the Trump administration decisions are putting some children and families in immediate danger, threatening the long-term health of others, and stealing futures of this generation and others to come. These impacts will be felt most among already vulnerable communities, hitting children of color and children from low-income households first and worst. And being a mom, I would do anything to protect my child and want to trust that the government is also looking out for kids on issues that it's harder for me to personally control, like air quality or water safety. That's why I find it particularly egregious that an administration has done so much to undercut the futures of so many kids across the country. The political appointees that make up the Trump administration have chosen to prioritize industry profits and political wins over children's health. And at UCS, we've tracked how this administration has done this by failing to enforce environmental protections and laws that are established, undermining its own protections and the science that underpins them, and censoring or ignoring its own scientists. Some of the issues covered in the report that others on this panel will speak to are a combination of immediate and long-term threats. There's a long list of decisions that have been made, but for immediate threats, the Trump administration has weakened air pollution standards and controls on industrial and vehicle emissions, which stings especially hard right now as scientists are beginning to understand the relationship between long-term impacts of particulate matter and air pollutant exposure and COVID-19 related health outcomes. The Trump administration has also reduced coverage of food assistance to millions of kids, which has forced parents to have to make tough decisions about how to keep food on the table and how to even ensure that the air that their kids are breathing is safe. There's also a long list of decisions made by the Trump administration that fail to protect us from toxins in our air and water and even our consumer products, including an insufficient update to EPA's lead standards that Dr. Mona will, of course, be talking about, and its abject failure in regulating chemicals that are known to be harmful to kids, like, for example, the insecticide chlorpyrifos. And finally, and perhaps most egregious, is the complete failure of this administration to accept climate science and act to reduce carbon emissions. This means that kids growing up today, including my daughter, will experience the most dire consequences of climate change, bearing no responsibility, despite bearing no responsibility for the problem. And we can't let this happen. So I will let others speak to more of the specifics now, and thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. So Mustafa, Jenna touched on briefly how vulnerable and marginalized communities are specifically impacted by environmental and climate-related issues. Could you talk a little bit more about that and talk about some steps that policymakers and change makers can do to make a difference.
Sure. Communities of color, lower wealth communities, and indigenous populations have always been the dumping grounds for everything that folks don't want. You know, we have been the sacrifice zones. In our country, we have 100,000 people who are dying prematurely each year from air pollution. And we know that it is communities of color and lower wealth communities are the places where we place those fossil fuel facilities, those same fossil fuel facilities that have been, poisoning communities of color. Are the same fossil fuel facilities that are pumping huge amounts of emissions into our atmosphere, warming up both our oceans and our planet. So we have to be focused on that. One, to protect the lives that are inside of those communities, but two, to also truly address what's going on in relationship to the climate emergency that we find ourselves in. We know that millions of additional folks are also being impacted from that pollution, and it's causing these chronic medical conditions, which of course now we're dealing with COVID-19. So we know that if you have cancers, if you have liver and kidney disease, if you have heart disease, if you have these lung diseases like asthma, it makes you more vulnerable to the coronavirus. It also shortens your lives in the places where people are being exposed as well. We also know that we've got 24 million folks in our country who have asthma. And we've got 7 million kids, and disproportionately it is African American and Latinx who are going to the emergency rooms, the ones who are losing their lives. So we have to be focused on these impacts that are happening in our most vulnerable communities if we truly want to win on climate change. And we also know that our policymakers need to make better choices. As was shared earlier, when people are rolling back the clean car rule, we know that disproportionately in the history of our country that roads and highways have been used to move wealth into certain communities, extract wealth from other communities, and dump off pollution. So when someone does that, they're making those communities more vulnerable in a number of ways. We know that when you start to roll back mercury regulations, or you remove us from the Clean Power Plan or even the Paris Climate Accord, what you're doing is you're hurting the communities who are often hit first and worst. So our policymakers have huge opportunities to actually strengthen our environmental laws, to make sure that enforcement is actually happening in a fair and equitable way. And if we do that, we can make real change happen. We can bring wealth back into communities that have often been unseen and unheard, and we can also save our planet at the same time.
Thanks, Mustafa. So Dr. Mona, one of the things that the Endangering Generations report touches on is lead. Can you talk a little bit about how that issue and the government's failures on that issue have impacted people, especially children, in your community?
Yeah, so it's great to be here. Happy Earth Day to everybody. I can listen to all of you for hours. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and your science with so many folks. So I'm a pediatrician in Flint, and as I hope you all know, we are recovering from our water crisis. In a couple of weeks, we will be on our 6th anniversary of our water switch, where we had our water source changed, really in a breakdown of democracy driven by austerity. Our water source was changed from the Great Lakes to the Flint River without proper treatment. And as such, we had corrosive water that went through our distribution systems, ate up our pipes, and lead went into our drinking water and into our bodies of our children. And when I, as a pediatrician, heard the word lead, I freaked out. I mean, it is a call to action. It is probably the most well-studied neurotoxins known to man. We also know that lead is a well-studied form of environmental injustice, a form of environmental racism. Our Flint kids, just like our Detroit kids, our Chicago kids, our Baltimore kids, our Philadelphia kids, already had higher rates of lead exposure, and this is the last thing that they needed. The science is clear. There's no safe level of lead. It impacts the core of what it means to be you, from cognition to behavior to really altering the potential of a child's entire life course trajectory. And this was on top of communities that were already suffering from so many toxicities, other sources of environmental contamination, air issues with higher rates of asthma that we heard about, poor schools, crumbling neighborhoods, lack of good nutrition, all these other things that also impact your life course development. And then we had the water crisis on top of that. So since really kind of working to uncover that crisis, we have been working hand in hand with our incredible Flint partners to make sure that we not only recover, but thrive from this crisis. And I think the most exciting thing that has happened for me and has really instilled in me so much hope, especially by being part of this panel right now, is the ripple effects from our crisis. It wasn't just Flint kids who were suffering from this form of environmental injustice. We were able to shine a light on the situation of children all over this country, Black, brown, white, rural, urban, that wake up to some of those same nightmares, be it environmental contamination, or be it lost democracy, or be it stolen opportunity. And we need to understand that all these things are interconnected. There's interconnections. When we talk about environment, we are also talking about labor, and we're talking about economics, and we're talking about social justice, and it's all absolutely related. And what Flint really brought to light is that this is not a unique story. This is not that crazy thing that happened to that one city over there where they changed their water source and their water was brown. But these are situations that are very similar, that are threatening the tomorrows of all of our children throughout this country. So I have been so inspired by the amazing activism that folks, especially young people, have had to bring a light to these issues, and realizing that it's not okay, that we can do better, and that we must do better on behalf of our children.
Thanks, Doctor. So next, Insay, how are children particularly impacted by climate change, and what can policymakers do to protect children's health?
Thank you so much, and the highest respect and appreciation to all of you on the panel. Children are particularly vulnerable, as many of the challenges that they already face daily, and as Mustafa mentioned, especially children of low wealth families and communities of color, only become magnified with climate change. Direct impacts include casualties, injuries, and trauma during and after major events like floods, storms, typhoons, hurricanes, and other natural disasters. Under 40% of Americans can sustain a $1,000 emergency. And clearly the costs and tags of trying to rebuild after those type of natural disasters will be way more than that. Not everyone can just pick up and leave their homes and stay at a hotel many miles away. And there's a lot of psychological implications to that as well. All children are certainly impacted by such trauma as their families go through such trauma. Increased morbidity and mortality due to ischemic heart disease, respiratory disease, and disease of the nervous system and kidneys, all during hot weather patterns. The last 2 Octobers were the hottest on record since we've been keeping track. What about the mental health concerns? Increased domestic violence and abuse during crisis situations is a very real thing. The National Poison Control Center actually has seen a huge spike even just the last 3 months just from COVID-19. Imagine what's going on during a major weather event or other climate implication event. Mourning the loss of loved ones, loss of support networks, inability to attend early learning centers and schools for long periods of time. And at the end of the day, children are dependent on their caregivers. And then there are a variety of indirect impacts, which certainly are important as well. Increased incidence of infectious and parasitogenic diseases due to increased rainfalls, like malaria risk. And we know that low-income communities have higher probability of malaria. Higher risk of intestinal infections due to the breakdown of water supply and sanitation networks, and overall scarcity of water. And increased drought conditions will present challenges for our food security, food quality, and access, especially in poorer communities. There will be increased morbidity and mortality from suspended particles in the air and other air pollutants because of forest fires and increased numbers of those, further exacerbating asthmatic and respiratory conditions. We know by 2050, 68% of the US population is expected to be living in urban environments. This forced migration will add serious stress to our already challenged early learning, school, and housing environments, where we already have a variety of problems such as lead poisoning and other indoor air pollutants of concern to children. All of these effects have enormous outcomes for children, in particular children of color and those in poor communities. So what can people do? Policymakers, we need to have effective action, and the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a crisis that everyone is impacted by, as will be the same with climate change, if not already. We need to be taking immediate action to mitigate climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, such as carbon dioxide, and to clean up our air with a specific transportation focus. Include child-specific vulnerabilities and needs into climate change policies, planning, and response. We need to build a strong economic case for mitigation by ensuring that the true costs of climate change are considered, including the full and individual and societal costs of childhood illness. We need to integrate the principles of environmental justice considerations into climate change planning and adaptation from the very beginning, not an add-on at the end, recognizing that communities are already facing health and stability and security issues and are particularly at high risk from climate impacts. We need to have investment in and implementation of preventive strategies to protect children from harmful impacts of climate change, such as surveillance and early warning systems. We need to have continued and increased support for state and local health departments and partners to adapt to the present and future health effects from climate change. We need to look at eco-district approaches where communities are a part of the economic and health benefits in a community and resilience strategies. And finally, policies that offer co-benefits, like reducing harmful emissions and promoting public health, such as clean energy, healthy food production, and smart community design. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Levi, as a plaintiff for the Juliana case, I'm wondering if you could give a little background and talk about how our generation especially is disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much, Jonah, and everybody else. It's a great honor to be part of this panel. So I am part of the Juliana case, like you said. Our case was filed in 2015, and it was the first federal constitutional climate lawsuit. 21 plaintiffs, ages 12, me, to 24, Kelsey. We are suing the US government for their actions to cause climate change. We're basically asking the US government to put a science-based climate recovery plan into place that will restore CO2 emissions to under 350 parts per million by the year 2100. So this case has been going on since 2015. I was 7 years old, and I knew that when my mom told me about this lawsuit that I needed to be part of it. I needed to be taking action. I knew that I just couldn't sit back. I'm not the type of person that is able to do that, sit back and watch this going on. So this case was a great outlet for me. So our generation, my generation, are disproportionately affected by climate change. We don't have the power to vote. We don't have the power to be able to say we can say that this is not okay, but there's not a whole lot of things that we can do. But I was lucky enough to find out about this lawsuit to be able to take action. And we have been kind of shut down saying, oh, this isn't your place, you shouldn't be taking action. But we as youth know that we need to be taking action, even if sometimes we are told that we can't be. There's so many things that have been happening that we don't know how to take action or what to do. But even if we are disproportionately affected, I still have that knowledge that I am doing something, that I have that ability. I try to help out all my other friends, all the youth, and to empower them to be taking action.
Awesome. Thanks, Levi. So now really quickly, just from our panelists, for everyone watching at home, what can they do to support your work and support America's children? Levi, I'll start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So for people that are out there and are wanting to do things, you can, one big thing is to sign up for updates on our case. I don't remember the link exactly. You can talk to your Congress member to let them know that that they need to be taking action to help save the youth and your future and the future of everybody else. You can you can tell them to publicly endorse our lawsuit by posting on social media. They can co-sponsor our resolution recognizing They can sponsor our resolution by recognizing children's fundamental rights and climate recovery. So those are a few things that you can do that will help make a change.
Awesome. And for those wondering about that link, it's youthvgov.org/join. Yeah. Insay, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. We need as many people as possible to join our children's environmental health movement. This is a movement for all children, just putting children at the first of everything we do. Policy making, standard setting, everything. You can do that at our website, cehn.org. Also, this is the 5th anniversary year this year of the Children's Environmental Health Day that we launched. Again, a day of assessment, reconnection, strengthening partnerships, adding more people to our cause, and all kinds of actions for and with youth and children. And also taking action as far as proclamations. We're looking for folks, constituents, to go to your mayors and your governors and ask them to create a proclamation for children's environmental health. This becomes an engagement tool on any issue.
Okay, Dr. Mona.
Right. There is so much that you can do, and but the most important thing that I want you to take home with after this panel is realizing that you have incredible power. Believe in yourself. Believe that you can make a difference. And I hope some of our stories bring that home to you. I'm wearing a shirt from Earth Day from when I was in high school. When I was a high school kid, I helped close down an incinerator. And that gave me a very early belief that even as kids, we can make a difference. And since then, I've always had the words of another doctor in the back of my head, Dr. Seuss, who said, unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. And as you know, that's from the Lorax. So please just take away that you are an amazing, powerful person and you can make a difference. And it's not just issues in places like Flint. There's issues everywhere that need your voice, your expertise, your skill set, your organizing, your passion, your activism. We need you.
Awesome. Mustafa?
I'll echo the words that Dr. Mona just shared. Remember that you have power unless you give it away. Also, you got to vote. You know, your vote is powerful. Your vote can be transformative. And I never tell anyone who to vote for, but I say vote for somebody who cares about your community. So definitely get engaged in the civic process, whether it's encouraging your parents to vote or you voting yourself. We've got to make sure that we are utilizing that to help make change happen. The other thing we have to do is reach out to your favorite artist or entertainer and let them know about the things that you care about and the things you want to hear them. Also, whether it's singing about or having in some of their plays or whatever it might be, or in the poetry that they create, because that is a powerful platform as well. And of course, you can make sure that you're supporting the Union of Concerned Scientists or the National Children's Health Campaign or the National Wildlife Federation. But the most important thing is to remember, as Dr. King said, that we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. So whether it's in dealing with the impacts that are happening on the environmental racism and environmental injustice side, or in relationship to climate change, we're all in this together, but we all can also make change happen.
Awesome, thank you. And Jenna?
Yeah, so first, I think everyone should follow the lead of and stand with youth organizers like you and Levi. You have so much power in your voice, so continue to use it and we'll follow you. Everyone else, we should exercise our democratic rights and hold elected officials accountable to prioritize kids' health, to use the science, and prioritize kids' health over polluter profits. I would also encourage you to read our report that we've talked about a lot during this panel on our website at act.ucsusa.org/endangering. And once you read our new materials, check out our resource guide, which features the incredible work of over 20 organizations doing awesome work on all these issues in environmental health field, including climate change, at act.ucsusa.org/protecting-kids. Together,
Awesome.
we can make sure kids' health is prioritized.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, our wonderful panelists. They've devoted so much time to these issues and taken the time to speak with us today. Thank you all at home for watching, and have a happy Earth Day and a happy Earth Week. If you want to get involved, whether you're a youth or an adult, you can go to nationalchildrenscampaign.org and join our fight for America's 74 million children. Please get involved, join us in our fight, and have a happy Earth Week. Thank you.